data. Joining us now for more on this is Reeve. He's a former co-founder and CEO of Tether, who's now the co-founder of Smart Media Technologies. And Reeve, it's great to get some time with you. Let me first get your overview. What do you think happened at FTX that Sam Bankman-Fried is either unaware of or not telling us?
Well, I really doubt that he's unaware of much that took place. It did grow really quickly. However, he was the CEO and maintained a really tight grip on everything that took place at both FTX and then I believe Alameda as well. So I don't think that he can plead ignorance on any of these charges.
So in that case, I mean, do you think there was commingling of funds going on? That seems to be pretty apparent. Was it fraud? I mean, I hate to make that kind of allegation without evidence, but I just wonder what your take is, since we've gotten the takes of pretty much everybody.
Yes, there's absolutely was commingling of funds, and now people are trying to determine how much SBF really knew. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. He was the CEO, so he either committed gross negligence or fraud. And at this level, either one should end him up in jail. He damaged over 1 million people, and he has to pay for that because he's ultimately responsible for everything that took place there.
Well, and it could not just mean repercussions for Sam Bankman-Fried himself, but the crypto industry as a whole, as we now have the focus of regulators and lawmakers renewed on this. How do you expect the tone to shift? What do you expect to hear in these hearings tomorrow, especially as there already has been effort to legislate crypto and stable coins as well, which goes back to Tether, that has struggled to see real finite progress? I mean, how do you expect things to change?
Well, tomorrow's going to be really interesting. So Sam's been on this apology tour for these last few weeks and really trying to win the hearts of the public. And we all feel that it's against the advice of his attorneys because he should just be quiet. But he's just facing potentially life in prison. So he's doing whatever he can to get people on his side, but I just don't think it's going to be successful. The media has been treating him for the most part very kindly, which is a big surprise. So we're hoping that after tomorrow, things shift a little bit and he ends up really feeling the heat and the pressure that's upon him because he really owes both the crypto industry and the general public a significant, not only apology, but he needs to pay for what took place.
Okay, so that is on his side, on the side of the parties that will be questioning him and potentially trying to make changes to laws as a result of this to avoid something like this happening again in the future. What should the composition of those changes look like, be it regulatory or legislative?
Yes, we do believe that there'll be a lot more regulatory oversight coming. And this has been a bipartisan issue. So even no matter what's been taking place in the House and the Senate, we feel that there will be more people leaning in. And a lot of the people in government are doing their best to be more educated and legislate responsibly. Unfortunately, actions like this will force legislation much quicker. So it might be broader reach than it needs to be. However, everyone's demanding some changes, which we do believe will be coming soon.
Reeve, good to see you. You obviously have your views on what happened here, talking about the possibility of gross negligence or fraud. These are obviously fairly serious things to allege that somebody has done. We'll wait for the legal process, of course, to run its course. But for you, then, is there evidence of those things? What is the best evidence that you've seen or read to make such a firm statement?
Well, for me, it's just my personal opinion that as the CEO, he is responsible for what took place. He can't claim ignorance. He can't claim poor management. And if he does claim poor management and ignorance, that's gross negligence. So he does need to hold himself responsible and his team. It is well known that he didn't have a CFO. How can you have an exchange of that size with no CFO? It's also quite surprising that these massive venture capital firms put in so much money and did all of this due diligence and with facts like that staring them in the face, and they still gave him the money. It's just time will tell, and more stuff is going to come out. But at this point, it's just all fingers point to him.
Okay, well, we'll wait to see what those facts are then. As the co-founder of Smart Media Technologies, I mean, clearly the whole crypto space has really been shaken by this story, and to some extent it's reflected badly on other players in the sector, or at least raised ongoing questions about the sector. Is that something that you as a business have noticed? Is there less enthusiasm from big players in the financial space to get more involved in crypto?
Right now, everyone's taking a much more cautious approach and sitting on the sidelines for a little while. So that is being seen across the industry, especially at the exchanges. However, the technology continues to be built. This technology is only 10 years old. It took the internet 26 years from 1969 to 75 before it got some real commercial applications. So the technology is still being built. People still realize the impact it will have, and the ease of use, more regulation, and more applications are going to be built soon. And so more people around the world will feel what this technology can deliver. So that's what's being taken place right now. People are heads down and building.
I wonder about, your involvement with Tether. It's been an amazing run there. It's the most traded cryptocurrency on Earth. At the same time, Coinbase came out last week and said they'll waive fees for anyone who wants to convert Tether to USDC. Implying that it's a safer technology. What do you say to the people who are concerned about a lack of transparency at Tether and who don't know which assets are backing their dollars there?
Well, it's an excellent question, and I believe what Circle or Coinbase did, because USDC is a joint venture between Circle and Coinbase, and this is just a purely competitive move. They're now marketing that their token is safer with no real proof or anything, but it is a marketing statement. And now there's free trades amongst, if you want to transfer your money from Tether to Circle. Tether to USDC. I don't believe that that's going to have much of an impact because those fees are pretty minimal. And so at the end of the day, people use these tokens for their utility, and all the stable coins, especially Tether and USDC, really provide tons of utility within the ecosystem and within cryptocurrency. So this is just simply trying to gain market share, going from the 46 billion and trying to shrink the gap between Tether's 69
for
billion.
sure. But Reeve, it seems like Tether gets more and more transparent throughout its life, but doesn't ever share everything, right? Why wouldn't you just put everyone's mind at rest and just or why wouldn't Tether just put up, an actual live real-time accounting of all the assets backing the Tether out there?
I really do believe the principals are doing their best possible job and able to be as transparent as possible. They do have audits on their website, and it seems that the industry at times doesn't feel that's enough. I don't know how much more in-depth they'll need to go to alleviate all the naysayers, but it has withstood this test of time.
All right, Reeve, we have to leave it there, but thanks so much for joining us. That's Reeve Collins of Smart Media Technologies and the co-founder of Tether. And for more